A lot of times we try to use technology to fix some other problems. Imagine we're on the fire ground and I'm the engineer and you're in charge of the incident. I'm flowing a deck gun, a 2.5 and 2 inch and 3/4 hand lines. You want to get another master stream in operation. And so I do it, but we're on a kind of a weak hydrant. So we're not getting enough water. I'm at the pump panel just hammering away to increase the pressure, which will not fix the problem. Because pressure is not the problem in that scenario. The problem is volume. You don't have enough water to flow all those lines. So increasing the pressure will not fix the problem. And I think a lot of times we fall into that same trap with technology. We'll have a lack of systems, and we try to correct for the lack of systems with technology. You're fixing the wrong thing. It's not a pressure problem, it's a volume problem. So very often, if we just look at what the actual problem is, it's a lack of systems. And technology may help, or it may exacerbate that.
Welcome to Ops Talk, Westminster Fire Department's operational training podcast, where we share ideas and knowledge through honest conversations, highlighting the people who do the work. I'm Eric Linnenburger, Deputy Chief of Operations. While built as a resource for our members, we invite the greater fire service and the community to be part of the conversation. What we share reflects our current approach under present conditions. Always follow your department's procedures and guidelines.
Hey everyone, welcome to Ops Talk. We're full of great ideas in the fire service, but turning them into action is where we often struggle. Today we're going to explore how members at all levels can move projects and ideas from concept to reality and advance our organizations. May not be the flashy part of the job, but the work we do off the fire ground is critical to how we perform on it. The problem is that most of us just haven't been trained for it. But today's guest is here to help us with that. Today's guest is Captain Peter Eunice. Peter is a project management professional and host of the Project Command podcast, which explores project management in the fire service. He brings a unique perspective on how proven project management practices can transform fire department operations, helping leaders at all levels turn ideas into action and actually get things done. Peter has over 14 years of experience in the Henrico County, Virginia Division of Fire, currently serving as the executive officer, where he leads critical planning initiatives and coordinates work across divisions. He has served as captain of strategic planning, captain of communications and liaison to the Department of Emergency Communications, lieutenant of training, lieutenant in field operations, fire academy instructor, and firefighter. Peter brings a deep and unique perspective, balancing formal education, training, and administrative knowledge with actual fire service operations field experience. Peter, welcome to Ops Talk.
Wow. Thank you. And that was a very, very kind introduction. I really appreciate you saying all that, and very excited to be here. Love what you're doing with this podcast.
I've been really looking forward to this conversation. You and I have been talking for a bit, was lucky enough to come on your podcast, and we had a great conversation there. So we're going to talk about the podcast here in a bit, but really love to get into, just kind of your path in the fire service and how you got into project management and your position currently at Henrico.
Yeah, well, I'd love to tell you about it. So, and thanks again. So my path, to kind of take a step back, I grew up in the Northern Virginia area, so just outside of Washington, D.C., and being a firefighter was all I ever wanted to do. I mean, I can't remember a time in my life when I wanted to do anything other than be a firefighter. So that's kind of the origin story. I got into a fire science program in Montana shortly after high school, and I got a degree in fire science, and then came to Henrico Fire Department. I applied to Portland, Oregon, and Henrico Fire Department, and I got hired in Henrico. And like you said, I started out as a firefighter first we go through our academy. We have a 36-week academy that our new hires go through, and I got assigned to Station 7, which is just a really interesting station. It's sort of on the lower end of the economic spectrum. It's a lot of stuff that goes along with that, and that was just a really fun assignment, a really good assignment, great place to learn. And eventually made my way to be an academy instructor. So I went back to teach at our fire academy, which is just a blast. That's probably one of the most fun assignments I've had. And got promoted there to lieutenant and stayed on. We'd had a lot of turnover in our training section, so I got promoted and I stayed on as our training lieutenant for a couple academies. And then I went out to be a lieutenant in field operations, and I went to Station 10, which is I think it's our best fire station. It's in our Broad Street corridor. So you have a lot of commercial stuff, which is just like a whole new animal. What it was for me, the stations I'd been at was like predominantly residential. And so to go to our station 10, where it's just so much commercial, mid rises, it felt like working for a different fire department. So it was a lot of fun. And I was there as an engine company lieutenant for 5 years, also a paramedic, I should say, and got promoted to captain. And that took me into the administrative side of the fire department. My first assignment was a captain of communications, and that's when I really started managing a lot of projects. And so I got up there, and almost immediately I was doing a project to test out Bluetooth functionality for our Motorola radios and our MSA air packs, and how to kind of make those two communicate with each other. And we tried that project a few years earlier, and we'd had some serious safety issues with it. So my project was test this equipment and see if those safety issues have been resolved, and if so, roll it out to the fire department. And just to even take a step back from that, our department it's a pretty big sized department. We have 23 fire stations, just under 700 sworn firefighters, all hazards agency. And so that project to start with was really intimidating, because I was just like, man, there's safety issues. I got to test it, make sure they've been resolved. And then I got to roll this out to our operations section. And I want it to go well. And so that led me down this path of, going back to school for project management, and just thinking like, okay, if this is what I'm going to be doing, and I already kind of wanted to go back to school after getting promoted, I figured, okay, now I'm a captain. This seems like a good time to kind of invest in myself and my education and go back to school. And I talked to my wife a lot about it, as I always do with important decisions. And we both felt like because I thought maybe I'll just go the leadership route and get like a certificate in leadership or something like that. And I just felt like the kind of generic leadership route wasn't, I think it's kind of, a lot of people do that, and it just didn't really interest me. But project management specifically, I was like, oh yeah, that's what I'm doing now. Maybe I'll go to school for project management. And in doing that, I discovered that there's a huge gap in the fire service with project management, because what I've discovered is, if you have a fire department and you take out the 911 calls, which is a big thing to take out, granted, but what you have left is projects, programs, processes, and systems. And every program, process, or system has to start as a project. Like, let's say Telestaff as a system. If you want to roll Telestaff out, you have to do a project. You have to train, and you have to communicate and write policies and deploy it and test it. So projects are a huge part of the day-to-day operations of a fire department, but it's something that historically we've just not trained our people on. And so when I discovered this, I immediately kind of went to the internet to see who's talking about this, who's been researching how to make project management work in the fire department. And what I discovered was there really wasn't anybody talking about it that I could find. I mean, a few people had written articles. Chief Brian Marcos in Smyrna, Georgia had written an article, which was really a really good article, by the way. But there really wasn't much beyond that. And so I decided, okay, well, there's a huge gap here, and I've identified that this is something that's really important, and there's not a lot of people talking about this, so I'll talk about it. And that's kind of what led me to go down this rabbit hole, get my project management professional certification, and some other certifications, and then start trying it out in our department in Henrico. Fortunately, I had a very supportive fire chief, very supportive leadership team. They saw the value in it early, and so yeah, that's kind of been it. That's the journey.
Yeah, it's fantastic. And you're right. There's a huge gap there. And like we've talked about before, I learned that hard and fast when I took on my first administrative role. We're just not taught that stuff. And why would we be early on, right? We're taught how to operate in the 911 emergency environment. But these are those skills that we're missing. And I appreciate you doing what you're doing. I was having a conversation with my EMS chief one day. We were both fresh from the field. Neither one of us had that administrative experience at all. And we were going to come up and we were going to change the world. But we realized, gosh, we do not know what we're doing as far as running projects and going from that tactical to strategic perspective. So I was telling him that, and then I swear the universe does what the universe does. And like the next day I came across your podcast, and just really, really like what you're doing with it. And it is filling that void. And I'd love for you to talk about just how that podcast came to be and the kind of response you're having from it.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I love what you said there about how we're just not trained for it. Like, again, also, like you said, why would we be when you're in the academy? I mean, I was an instructor in our academy, like I said, and then later the training lieutenant for it. And that's just so far from the stuff we're thinking about teaching our recruits. And even in officer development, I've gone through a bunch of different officer development classes. Some were mandated by our HR, others were ones I chose to go to. And I don't remember it ever being covered. I think that there's a direct link between a department's ability to manage projects and their ability to deliver for their community and their workforce, because everything we do that's important has to start as a project. If you want, new turnout gear for the folks in the field, that's a project. If you want a new ladder truck, that's a project. If you don't like telestaff, it doesn't work for you and you want to replace it, that's a project. And so you have to get good at deploying things. So anyways, with all that said, to start the podcast, I really just thought, how can I talk to people about the things I've learned? Because one of the things that I discovered was when I was a new acting officer, one of my first lieutenants, who was a real mentor to me, his name is A.G. Bryant, was telling me about how you want to develop that slide deck of images in your head. And you'll go to fires, you'll go to a smells and bells call or an extrication or whatever, and every call is going to be different, but you'll see similarities and you'll say, okay, well, this fire, obviously it's going to be totally different from all the other ones, but this looks like another fire I went to. And so you can kind of pull from that mental set of images that you have. But for projects, nobody ever manages enough projects typically to develop that slide deck. And I think it's the same way. Not any project no two projects are going to be the same, but you'll have ones that have similarities. And so if you've managed enough of them, you can start to see the categories of projects. Like a great example is an equipment rollout. Every single fire department, probably, certainly in this country, probably the world, is going to roll out equipment 2 or 3 or 4 times a year, every single year
Least.
without fail. And that project is a really similar project. You have to develop policy around the equipment. You have to train your people on it. You have to communicate how you want it stored and how you want it used and cared for, and who is the program manager for it. If it breaks, who do you call? So those equipment rollouts are really, really similar projects. And so if we can get one dialed in, we can get the next one dialed in, and the next one, and the next one. But I don't think people have had enough opportunities to work with projects, so maybe they don't see that. And so my goal with the podcast was, I'm going to take the things I've learned through my formal education in project management, but also through the now, 2 or 3 or 4 years, I've been experimenting with different styles of project management and different, teams, different ways to put a team together and see what works. And I've learned a lot of valuable lessons, some through success and some through failure. And I just wanted to share that with the fire department, because I'm utterly convinced there should be no secrets in the fire service. I think sometimes we forget that we're not working for the CIA, and we try to keep things close to the chest because we feel like it's a trade secret. There shouldn't be any trade secrets in the fire department. So if I've learned some things that can help departments deploy equipment better or open fire stations better or spec ladder trucks better, I want to share that. And so the reaction, I think it's been really positive. I've had the chance to talk to a bunch of different fire service leaders and ask them, what are your challenges? What are you struggling with? And also, what projects are you running right now? And it's been so interesting for me to discover that we're all running the same projects. We're all doing the same stuff. And I was talking to you, and you were talking about some of the projects that you've run recently. And it was crazy. You were talking about a 12-lead monitor project. We're doing that exact project right now. You talked about a radio system changeover. You're moving from one radio system to another. We're doing that exact project right now. It's going to go live in 27. So I was just thinking, like, if you discover all these things that made those projects go well, how valuable is it for me to know those things? And maybe I can make our projects go better. So I've had a very positive response from the fire service. I think the big challenge is explaining kind of the need. And I think, a lot of people, once they think about it, they're like, oh yeah, we are running a lot of projects. But at first glance, it feels like something that is more for the private sector or, software or technology companies. But I think, once we kind of get down to the brass tacks of it and we realize we're going to do projects year after year, and the better we can do them, the more bandwidth and money we have for other projects and other initiatives. And so, yeah, I think all said and done, it's been a very positive reception for it.
Yeah, you're definitely filling a void. And I think what maybe some people wouldn't understand is, if they have been in the field, and this podcast is very, very centered on operations work, but this is operations. This supports operations, and not every fire department is going to have the benefit of an executive officer position like you're currently in that can really focus on these things, but we're all still doing the things that you're talking about. And I really feel like it's something we struggle with. We get the thing out there, we get the piece of equipment out there, but we don't create the support for it to make it completely successful. And so I'd love to talk a little bit about how these projects and how taking these ideas to full implementation is still well within the operations realm. I think that it's not just reserved for that executive officer. It's not just reserved for the deputy chiefs in the department. It's what we do every day. Would you be able to talk about some of the projects that really do matter to operations and can really make or break our success in the field?
Yeah. Well, you're 100% right about that. And so many projects get run out of operations, sometimes because they have to, and sometimes because that's where the people that are best positioned to run those projects happen to be. So, I think the best example is training projects. And even to think of training as a project. And so what I mean by that specifically, and this is a project I used to get all the time as an engine company lieutenant, is put together next month's multi-company training. So we have 3 districts in my fire department, east, west, and north. I've been at 3 different fire stations, all on the north side. And often, and now at Station 10, we have a ladder truck and an engine company there. And so myself and the other lieutenant, the ladder company lieutenant, we would design training for 8 fire stations. So that's how many, we have eight companies in the north. So it's 8 engines, 3 ladder trucks, and a heavy rescue. Together multi-company training, either a high-rise training, and it would be an AM and a PM session, and we'd have to factor in lunch, and we'd have to factor in travel times and what specific training we wanted to get done, how will we keep track of the training, and all that kind of stuff. And so when you really think about it, that's kind of almost definitionally a project. And to take a step back, the definition of a project is a one-time endeavor designed to create a unique product or service. And so when we think about it kind of from that perspective, putting together that training that you're going to just do that one time with those companies is a great example of a project. And I think having our people in operations, they don't have to go all the way down the rabbit hole on managing a project and write all these, fancy elaborate documents, but they just have to know the kind of basics of how do you structure that work. If someone gives you that assignment and they say, put together multi-company training for 8 fire stations, how do you do that? How do you get the information? How do you get the requirements? How do you develop a scope? And how do you put all that together in a timeline? And so I think those kinds of projects get run out of operations all the time. But another thing that I think we miss a lot in the fire service is very often the person running a project is who we perceive as the subject matter expert. And so what I mean by that is, let's say we have a project to put out a new 4-gas monitor. And you're putting you as the operations chief are putting that project together. It's kind of hard to imagine how you're going to do that without some members of your hazmat team. So you'll have some people from hazmat on that project team, and maybe they'll even be running it. Maybe you'll even go to the captain of your hazmat station and say, hey, this is your project. I need you to review different 4-gas monitors, pick the one that we want, go through an RFP process, purchase them, train the people on them, roll them out, write policies for them, and communicate it. That's a very common project that gets run out of, or projects just like that. Those are very common to be run out of operations. And I think our ability to deliver those projects is, number one, just great for the department. If you get that project, you want to do a good job. Firefighters, I think, intrinsically just want to do a good job. But it's also a great opportunity, I think, for development, because as you move up in the organization, you're going to get more projects and you're going to get more complex projects. And so what might start as, put together multi-company training for 8 fire stations, and now maybe you're putting together, training for the whole district, and then you get promoted and now you're doing a more complex project. And so getting those reps in with some of those more basic projects puts you in a position so that you can be the guy to step up, the guy or the girl to step up for your department when they really need you. And those projects come up all the time, and you really need somebody to come in and do a good job. And the only way you can get to a position where you can do that is if you've had the reps managing those other, maybe smaller projects. So to kind of come back, it's kind of a long rambling answer. I apologize, but to come back to it, I think the ability for our operations folks not to go all the way down the rabbit hole, but just to understand what are the first few steps you need to take, how do you organize work, I think that's critical. It's absolutely critical for the immediate, for the right here, right now, but also for those individuals as they move on and progress in their careers.
Yeah, such a good point. And I think I talk a lot about mentorship, and I actually think we sometimes get mentorship in the fire department wrong. We definitely have gaps between positions. I think we do a good job of obviously preparing our paramedics. It's a very clear-cut process to get through paramedic school. You've got algorithms to follow, you've got all this education, you've got field training, you've got all the things. We do the same thing with our lieutenants, our first line company officers. We could always be better, but we've got a pretty clear cut process. But I think that we struggle going from that first or second level leadership position into that middle and upper level positions. And a lot of it is just this. And I think the ability to start working on things naturally and setting systems and creating processes that work and being able to discern the difference between how we're going to operate out in the emergency environment versus how we're going to operate when we're strategically planning a project. There are intangible benefits that just can't even be measured down the road, and that stuff matters. And so really encourage people just to get involved when you can. Even though, this project seems kind of insignificant or small, it may just be a small purchase of equipment, like do it right, learn how to do it right. And I think it'll reap rewards down the road for sure.
Yeah, and if I could just say one more thing about that, I know a lot of people in the fire service, and I don't even know how I want to say this, but for them, going on calls is the most important thing. And I want to be clear, I do think going on calls is the most important thing. And there are some people, and that's like they just want to focus on that. And then there's people that want to do that, but they also recognize that if you want to move the department forward in big and meaningful ways, those are going to be projects. And think about the things that you're passionate about. And I think if we all kind of do this little exercise and we think about the things in the fire service that we're passionate about, like for me, I'm so passionate about firefighter mental health. Unfortunately, in my department, we've had a few suicides over the last several years, and those are just unbelievably devastating. And so I'm very passionate about firefighter mental health, and I'm really passionate about cancer risk reduction. I think those are things we just do for the brotherhood. And because I'm passionate about that, I would like to see our department move forward and do better on those things. And so I was involved in a project to put, on-scene decontamination kits on our fire engines so that we can get do that gross decon on scene. And I've been a part of projects where we, work to get a mental health clinician hired full time to just go around the fire stations checking on people. And so the things that we're passionate about and that we think will make your department better, whether that's, hey, our extrication equipment is not, it's not up to snuff. We got to get better equipment. Okay, let me go hunt down a grant so I can get some grant money. Let me figure out how to buy new equipment and roll it out. Whatever it is that you are passionate about and you want to move it forward, if you ever want to get it past the sort of like great idea phase, you're going to have to be able to put together a project. Otherwise, the thing that you're passionate about will forever just be a good idea.
So true. And we see those people that have those they're great ideas.
Yeah,
They've got that passion behind it, but they don't know how to present it. And then it dies. And then it becomes, they become resentful.
Yeah, for
sure. And they feel like they're, we've killed their spirit and we're not listening to their ideas. Learning project management and how to attack these things strategically will not only help with the long-term success of it, but it also helps you to present it. Maybe this is a good time to start talking about just some of the basics of project management. How can our people, especially at the operations level, be successful by utilizing some of those key components of good project management?
That's a great question. I mean, that's such a great question because just like with ICS, if you go to a kitchen fire, you're going to use ICS, of course. You'll establish command. You'll be the IC. Maybe you'll have a safety officer and a fire group supervisor, but you're not going to build out the whole ICS structure. You won't have a logistics section. You won't have a finance section, and all that stuff. If you go to a plane crash, maybe you would do those things. But the point I'm making is that you have to scale ICS, otherwise it's too clunky. You don't want to do all those things on a kitchen fire. It's too much. Project management's the same way. You're not going to go all out on a project to build a roof vent simulator. You would just do the project management work that you need to do. I was always told, and I think it's totally true, that however the first 5 minutes of a fire goes, so too goes the rest of the fire. So if you have the ladder truck that gets a good spot in front of the house, and the first in engine gets a good water supply over the radio, and then they fulfill that water supply, and then the first line gets off the engine and to the front door in a timely manner, whatever else happens, there's a pretty good chance that fire's going to go well. Not always, but if you can do those few things, pretty good chance that fire's going to go well. And on a project, it's the same way. If you get the first few things done well, it's a pretty good chance that project's going to go well. And so the first few things that you should always do, I run almost every single project the same way in the beginning. Now they're different in the middle, but every project should pretty much start the same way. And that is step one. You got to understand the work you're being given. So let's say, you give me a project to do and I don't really understand what you're asking me to do. The first and foremost, you have to ask questions until you sufficiently understand the work that you're being asked to do. Now, you're not going to understand everything at the beginning. You never do, but you want to at least understand, okay, you want me to put on a training class for this number of people. Got it. Or you want me to set up a functioning fire department pharmacy, or you want me to set up this program. Okay, I understand the basics of what you're asking me. The next thing you need to do is figure out who the stakeholders are. And this is critical because a lot of times in order to succeed in a project, you're not going to be able to get all of the what we call requirements just, by thinking about it in your head. And the way I've explained this before is, let's just say you hired me to build a shed for you in your backyard. And you said, hey, build me the shed in my backyard. If I just go and I build any old shed I want, are you going to be happy with that project? No, of course not, because in your mind, you had specific requirements that shed had to meet. Maybe it had to be 30 by 30, or maybe it needed to have electricity, or maybe the HOA requires that it be painted the same color as your house. My HOA requires. And so you have all these requirements that you have in your head, and maybe the HOA, who would be a stakeholder, has in their heads. And I've been tasked now as the project manager with building this shed. But if I don't take the time to identify who are the stakeholders for this project, I'm not going to be able to fully understand the requirements to successfully complete it. So step one is you have to figure out who your stakeholders are. And that can be a challenge, but just think about it like this. Who has skin in the game? If you're rolling out a new piece of equipment, I can guarantee you that touches your logistics section. They're going to be a stakeholder. There probably is going to need to be a training element to it, so it's going to touch your training section. Things almost always impact IT, and I often say every project is an IT project just because that's the modern fire service. But IT will almost always be one. So you just think about which sections are going to be impacted and then picking the person that can adequately represent the needs of that section. So maybe it's your logistics captain, and he'll say, hey, that piece of equipment that you want, we can't order it. We have to order it from this company because we have a contract with them. Okay, fair enough. That's a requirement. The requirement has to be from this company. And your training section might say, okay, yes, but we can't start training until February because this is our training calendar and it's booked up. Okay, another requirement is training can't begin until February. So checking in with your stakeholders to figure out the requirements is absolutely critical. The next thing beyond that is you have to collect those requirements, which we already talked about a little bit, but collecting requirements is foundational because once you adequately understand the individual requirements, now you can put together a scope. So this is the way that it looks in my mind. Identify stakeholders, put together a shared document or some other way that you can work collaboratively. And then over the course of a week or two, have all those stakeholders and all of your project team members input all of those project requirements. And then I like to take that list of project requirements, and it'll be 10 or 15 or 20 individual requirements where once you've met all those requirements, the project's going to be a success. And then I like to drop them into ChatGPT or whatever your preferred AI model is, and make sure there's no, confidential information in there, and then drop it in there and say, turn these requirements into a scope document. And now you'll get a crisp scope document. So then once you have your scope document, you have to break that down because scope documents are definitionally high level. So part of the scope will be communicate this to the department. So you want to break down your scope into actionable, like bite-sized pieces of work that you could assign to somebody else. That's how you know they're broken down enough. Could I take this and give it to somebody on my team and say, do this? So back to the scope, if we have communicate this with the department, I can't take that and say, hey, go communicate with this to the department. So I need to break that down. So now I'm going to say, write a firewall email, put a 1-paragraph excerpt in our department newsletter, and get it to our communication specialist so we talk about it in the next chief podcast. Those would be, if I break that scope down into activities lists, I can communicate to the department, and I can break it down into those 3 activities. And so you do that with your whole scope. You break it all down and so that it's all bite-sized. And what you'll end up with is a great big giant activities list. And it'll have, 30 or 40 or 50 activities, like a to-do list. And if you were to do everything on that to-do list, the project is done. So you take that activities list and it's going to have, 30, 40, 50 things on it. And then you're going to turn that into your schedule. So when does the project start? Well, you gave it to me on January 1st. So let's just say it starts on January 1st. And then you say, hey, this has to be done by June 1st. Okay, well, now I know the outside limits of the project. I know that it starts on January 1st and it ends on June 1st. So now I'm going to take that activities list and I'm going to plug it in along my timeline. And I'll say, okay, what needs to come first? This. Okay, put that at the beginning. What's going to go at the end? That. Plug it in. And I'll plug in all those activities along my timeline. And now I have a timeline. I have a schedule. And the last thing you need to do is take your schedule and turn it into a budget. So you go item by item. Okay, draft an email to send to the department. How many hours of overtime is that going to cost? Okay, do I need to purchase anything else? No. Okay, so that'll cost me this amount. And go down the line and estimate based off of the activity, how much is that each individual activity going to cost? Now you have a budget. So if you do those things, what you end up with is you end up with a stakeholders list. You end up with a list of requirements for successful completion. You end up with a scope. You end up with a schedule, and you end up with a budget. And in my mind, that's the equivalent of the ladder truck gets to the front of the house. The first in engine gives a good water supply and gets that first line to the front door in a timely manner. That's the first step to doing any project. If you do those things, there's a really high likelihood your project will be successful.
I really like how you break that down. And for anybody that is interested, and I highly, highly recommend it, go to the Peter's Project Command podcast. He has episodes on really all of these things. And I think you have one episode just on scope because it's so important, but it is so scalable. Like you said, you don't go into the depth you might go into, say, for a multi-million-dollar budgeted project as you would for a training prop or something like that. And so
Exactly.
all scalable, but start yourself off on the right foot.
Well, and I'm sorry, can I just say one more thing about that?
Please.
Let me distill all that down to one sentence. When you start a project, you have to define success. You just have to define what success looks like, because a lot of times you'll work really, really hard on a project, and at the end, you'll show it to, what's called your project sponsor, and that's the person who's authorized the work, on whose behalf the work is being done. You'll show them the work you've done, that you've worked so hard on, and it's not what they had in their mind. And so now there's a frustration that's been, now you're both frustrated because you've worked very hard, and it's not what they wanted, and it's not an indictment on your work ethic. It's just that you didn't get on the same page at the beginning of the project and say, first, define the problem, because a well-defined problem is half solved. So first define what is the specific problem that we're trying to fix. And then if we do fix this problem, what exactly does success look like? What would you need me to do specifically so that you could say, great job on this project? Just do those 2 things and you're already on the right track.
Yeah, very good. Let's talk about what goes wrong with these projects. What do you typically see within your own organization, but especially in talking to others? What are some of the common problems you see out there?
Yeah, the first one I'll talk about is scope creep. And this is a big one in the fire department, because once you get a project going and you put together a team and you identify your stakeholders and you have a plan and you have money allocated and you're rolling, people will sense that and they want to get their stuff done as a part of your project, which is totally understandable. So you'll hear things like, hey, while you're doing that, can you also do this? Or, hey, since you're adjusting the CAD recommendations for our ladder trucks, why don't you also do it for our heavy rescues? Just because they're very similar. So just while you're in there, why don't you do that? And very often this happens. And so your scope will continuously expand, and it'll be just another, hey, while you're in there, do this. While you're in there, do that. And then the next thing you know, the scope of your project has ballooned out so much that it'll either take, significantly longer than it was supposed to, or maybe you just won't get it done at all. So The reason it's important to make a scope is so that you can then protect that scope. You kind of have to speak up and protect your project. And so that may involve some conversations with your project sponsor where you just say, hey boss, if we do all these things, I'm just not sure we can get this done by the deadline. And so you have to protect your scope. First, you have to build your scope, then you have to protect it. But another thing that I see, and this is probably a little bit more of a macro view on it, I just think that organizations try to take on too many projects, and there's not a good filter for what should be a project and what needs to wait. And the problem with that is your resources are finite, and sometimes it's not even the resources that we see. Like sometimes it's not about budget dollars, it's about the amount of hours that somebody has to work on it. Like for example, IT. If you're trying to roll out a piece of equipment and it's going to take 10 hours of IT bandwidth and they don't have 10 hours of IT bandwidth and you've forgotten to, check in with them, then your project's not going to succeed. It'll die on the vine. And projects that die on the vine are the worst kind because they suck up resources and then they never get anything done. And they also totally disenfranchise and demoralize the project team. And I think we've all, well, maybe not everybody, but I've definitely been a part of projects where they were just a bridge to nowhere. And you work really hard and you put your blood, sweat, and tears into something, and then the project just goes absolutely nowhere. And then it just kind of makes you want to not do any more projects. Like, I'm not going to waste my time if that's how this is going to go. So it's really damaging to have a project die on the vine. So the way to think about it is instead of starting 30 projects and finishing 10, maybe we should start 15 projects and finish 15 projects. And the last thing I'd like to say on that is, we talked about technical debt. Technical debt is like the hidden enemy of productivity. And so just to kind of go, a little bit into that, we have so many of these projects and we get them 90% done. So we'll have a piece of equipment and that's honestly, that's a casualty of having too many projects. So your department starts too many projects and now you feel like you got to, all right, we're done. We've done the important things. Let's move on to the next project. And so maybe you're rolling out a piece of equipment, but you get the equipment in the firehouse and you train people on it, but maybe you didn't communicate how you want that equipment cared for. Maybe you didn't identify a program manager and you didn't update the policies for that, if that was needed. And so now somebody's going to break the equipment because they weren't using it right. You're going to start getting questions like, hey, this policy question, that policy question. Then someone's going to have to send out a division-wide email. Hey guys, this is how we want you to plug this thing in or take care of it or whatever. And now imagine that's for every project you do. Every single project that you get to 90%, there's going to be technical debt, which is what that last 10% is called, that's going to accumulate. And it's going to generate this slow trickle of work that comes in from unfinished tasks. And if you do that project after project, year after year, you end up with a great big giant pile of technical debt. And then it creates a drag on your team. And now instead of working on the things that they want to be working on right now, they're addressing issues from the projects that they thought were already done, but they're not. They're 90% done. And so I see a lot of that. And I've talked to a lot of different people throughout the fire service, and they all say, oh, yeah, we have a lot of that going on in their department. We do in my department. And that is a very insidious issue because, one, it creates this feeling of we're drowning in work. We have all the projects we're working on now, but I also feel like I can't get rid of these projects that I thought were done. So it creates this sense of disorganization, like we're drowning. And then it also slows down all of the work exponentially that you're doing. So those are just some of the kind of the big ones. Oh, and one more thing I'll say, just lack of communication with stakeholders, not adequately checking in with IT or with budget or people that are going to make or break a project. Like if you don't talk to budget and they don't have the money for your project's going to fail. And if you need something from IT and they can't give it to you, it's probably going to fail also. So not checking in or adequately identifying stakeholders and not communicating with them enough.
The stakeholder piece can't be overstated. I mean, I see it all the time where we get so excited. We are the experts in that piece of equipment. And so we think we know how it needs to be done, but we don't bring the right people to the table. And we end up cleaning up afterwards, or we end up having a bunch of hurt feelings. We end up pointing fingers.
Totally.
And we could, especially on the IT side, those of us that don't have, if you're working for, in our case, a municipal department, your county, we're sharing resources a lot of times. So our IT resources are IT resources for the whole city. They're not in our office. And
same for us.
Yeah, we have to anticipate those things. And you bring them into the room and make them part of the conversation, and they start to help you champion that project as well.
Yeah.
But I love the technical debt piece. And, we've talked about it quite a bit offline, and it happens everywhere. And it just feels like this burden that
Yeah.
continues to build as well.
Totally.
And maybe we should all make it our New Year's resolution to just go in and not take on anything new and just chip away at that technical debt
I,
over the
I,
first couple months of the year.
I honestly, like, I believe in that. I do, because, what you find is you start, and there's this concept that the debt snowball, where you pay off the smallest debts first. So you find that piece of equipment that you rolled out where all it really needs is an email to get sent out saying, do this, don't do this person's in charge, call this person for a replacement or repair. And then the project is at 100%. So finding those small ones, getting them done. And then as you do that for more and more projects, you'll feel that drag being lifted, and you'll see an increase in your velocity. And also you get that little dopamine hit from, scratching stuff off, like really, really scratching it. Now it's at 100%. Let me just say one quick thing about IT. One thing about working with IT that I would like to tell everybody, I think it's so critical, and it's antithetical to how firefighters typically like to do business. We like to come to IT and we like to tell them, this is the piece of software that we want. Just make it work. Just turn it on, plug it in, make it work. And they can't do that. We're on the same team as IT, but we have different priorities. And their priority is preventing something catastrophic. I mean, they do a help desk function, they help with software installs, but the main role of IT is to prevent something catastrophic, like a ransomware attack or a total system failure. And so they're more in a protectionist mindset than we are. And so I've found the best way to work with IT is to just come to them with the problem, not the solution, and say, hey, we need a piece of software that will help us schedule overtime. Not, hey, tell us staff what we want, just install it. Just come to them and help, and let them be part of the problem solving side of it, not just the, take this and do it kind of thing.
Yeah, such a good point. And I think firefighters, we look at IT like the Geek Squad from Best Buy. Where it's like, I'm going to take my broken equipment to you, and you're just going to get down in the technical aspects, and you're going to fix my technical problems. But they need to be part of that bigger picture, strategic process. And
yeah, totally.
And we operate differently, and that's just got to be understood. What about, as we're talking here about technology specifically, are you using any specific technology for project management, or is there technology we should be considering just in general within our fire service?
Yeah, another great question. So let me get, if it's okay, let me get on a soapbox for just a quick second about technology. Something I see a lot. I think that, a lot of times we try to use technology to fix other problems. And so let me give you an example. Imagine we're on the fire ground, and I'm the engineer for the first in engine, and you're in charge of the incident. And I'm flowing a deck gun, a 2.5 and 2 3/4 hand lines. And you come to me and you want to get another master stream in operation. And so I do it, but we're on a kind of a weak hydrant. So we're not getting enough water. And so I'm at the pump panel just hammering away to increase the pressure, which will not fix the problem, because pressure is not the problem in that scenario. The problem is volume. You don't have enough water to flow all those lines. And so increasing the pressure will not fix the problem. And I think a lot of times we fall into that same trap with technology. We'll have a lack of systems, and we try to correct for the lack of systems with technology. And you're fixing the wrong thing. It's not a pressure problem, it's a volume problem. And so very often, if we just look at what the actual problem is, it's a lack of systems, and technology may help, or it may exacerbate that. And then the other thing I would say about technology is that technology, I've found, is really only as good as your ability to deploy it. Teams is a great example. Microsoft Teams. Teams is a great piece of software, and you can do a lot of really good stuff with it. You can manage a project through it. You can do all kinds of stuff. But if you don't deploy it right, if you just buy the software and throw it into service, maybe you kind of do some slapdash training, but not enough, and there's no real expert on it who can help people. And then really the only people that are going to know how to use it are the people that self-teach and watch YouTube videos on it. And now you have a great piece of software, but all your people are going to be like, oh, this sucks. It's no good. It doesn't help. I don't understand it. And it's not the software's problem. It's that we didn't roll it out right. So a lot of times our software problems are more of a deployment problem or a systems problem. And I think we're trying to correct it with software because it keeps us from having to look in the mirror and recognize that we need better systems. And so we just think, oh, we got to buy this new thing. With that being said, there are some really good pieces of technology out there. And I think for me, the most important one is collaborative technology. And so what I mean by that is the ability for a project team to work on something from different locations. And that's especially important for ops people, because if you're given a project while you're in operations, you're likely going to have a team that's made up of people from A, B, C shift, admin, wherever. And so the ability to co-work from different locations is critical. And so that could be anything from kind of the Microsoft 365 suite or shared documents, which is, I'll tell you, my preferred way of getting things done. Or maybe it's just something as simple as a Zoom or a Teams meeting, the ability to get your whole team together while two of the people are on shift and one of the people is, on vacation, and you can still all be in the same place. And that's not anything new. That technology's been around for a long time, but better leveraging that, I think, is critical. And so that's probably where I would start. And then I think hopefully we'll talk about AI. I think obviously AI is, it's if you can't answer that question, what technology should we be leveraging without talking about AI? I mean, that's kind of the elephant in the room. So yeah, kind of a winding answer, but that's kind of my thoughts on that.
No, it was definitely one of the biggest challenges when I moved from the line to the admin role is trying to coordinate these projects where I'm dealing with 3 different shifts, multiple people, but then I'm also trying to incorporate the admin people in that are extremely busy, and then people outside my own department, like say the IT folks and that sort of thing, dispatch or whoever it might be at the time. And organizing all these schedules is so challenging. So I'm glad you brought that up. But let's go there. Let's go to AI. We were just having some technical issues before we started recording here, and we're both talking to AI, trying to work through it, right?
We should have recorded that and put that out as like, hey,
great.
This is how you use ChatGPT to troubleshoot audio issues. And I was literally, before the interview, it's funny you bring that up, I was taking pictures of the screen and uploading it into ChatGPT like, hey, why can I not hear this audio or whatever? And honestly, that's the only way you get a guy like me who's not at all tech savvy that can have a podcast. There's no way I'd be able to do it if I didn't to be able to take a picture of it and say, what's the problem? Why can't I clip this audio, or why can't I hear this person in it, and does all your troubleshooting for you? So, I mean, yeah, just a perfect example.
We literally were working together and on our own with our various AIs to get through it. And we did. We worked through it, and here we are.
You're listening to the results of it now.
So let's talk about it. What are you seeing, and how are you seeing AI being a benefit to the fire service? I mean, it's pretty obvious on the administrative side, but I think even on the operations side, there are some things that we can really leverage when it comes to AI. How are you using it?
Yeah, there's a lot of different directions to go with this. I think before I say that, I'd just like to say that I think there's a lot of concern and trepidation about AI, and on a lot of levels. From the sort of administrative level, we're worried about, does it go too far? Does it cross the line? And I think from an operations level, they're a little bit unsure of what the policy is. They don't want to get in trouble. AI is so incredible that a lot of times it feels like you're cheating. It's such a force multiplier that it feels like cheating. It feels like you have the answers to a test. And so I think there's a lot of trepidation from the guys and girls in the field, where they're like, I don't want to get in trouble, and I don't fully understand my department's policy on this. And so with AI, I think first and foremost, it's incumbent on fire service leaders to make sure that the policy keeps up with it, but also that we have open lines of communication, and we're either championing it or, at the very least, setting clear expectations for how it should be used, to alleviate some of that concern and to kind of free up our people to get creative with it. So anyways, with that being said, you're right. I think the most obvious use cases are administration. It's great for the sort of like low level stuff. It's great for document generation. So if I'm working on a project and I'm done with the project, and I want to put together a project closure, a closeout report, which is a critical element to closing a project the right way, I can upload a document with my project plan. I can upload a copy, or I can upload, different, documents I made throughout the course of the project. And I can then say, okay, now take all these documents and turn them into one succinct project closeout report. And I'll go through and I'll read it and I'll edit it, but 80% of the work is done. So I think we can most clearly see its opportunities in administration, but they're there in operations too. And what I would say to that is, when I was in operations, there's a lot of stuff going on in admin that you just aren't aware of and don't care about. And so I see that AI can really close the gap. It can help you if you aren't, a project management professional and you're tasked with running a project in operations. You can use ChatGPT for the ideation phase of the project. You can say, hey, my battalion chief asked me to put together this training with this many people over this period of time with these requirements and these constraints. Like, how should I go about doing this? And it can help you kind of put that plan together in your head. So I think there's that. And then my favorite thing to do with AI, and this is probably one of the things I do with it the most, is I just use it to learn new concepts. And so I'll say, hey, I've been asked to put together a CIP plan for the chief of staff. What goes in a CIP plan? This, and this. Okay. How do I come up with that? And it'll say, do this, this, and this. Like, what should I research to better prepare me for that? So things like that, like just learning stuff, it's really valuable. And then another thing I really like, and I'll just, caveat this one, you do have to be very careful with this, but for data analysis, I find it's very useful. So, we're looking at ways to cut our overtime expenditures in my department where, obviously everybody's kind of expecting some economic headwinds. And so we're looking for ways to kind of tighten the belt. And so you can drop a copy of your publicly available budget and you can say, give me the 3 or 4 overtime codes that use the most overtime. Okay. And then what months did they generate the highest overtime usage? And it can just point you in the right direction. Oh, hey, wow. In March, we always spend, 30% more overtime than any of the other months. Why is that? Like, is there anything we can do about that? So just the ability to kind of aggregate or put together large volumes of data. In my department, we're a very big department and our claim to fame is we're really good at planning. And even with that being said, we only have one data person. And so, if I want data run, it could take me weeks to get that data through our data person she's very backed up, obviously, because it's just one of her. But I can get a first glance with AI. It can give me the sort of preliminary analysis on that data. So anyways, all that to say, there are a ton of use cases. And I think the limit on those use cases, it really is your imagination and your understanding of the technology. And I think one more thing I'd say is, because AI can generate such unbelievable results and because it feels like alien technology, I think a lot of times one of the big barriers is people think that, well, this is so far above my ability to understand, or this is way too, it must be so hard to get AI to do what I want it to do. And that's just, nothing could be further from the truth. I think it's the funniest thing when I see books online like ChatGPT for Dummies or How to Better Understand ChatGPT. And it's like, dude, if you could just literally open up ChatGPT and say, write a book called ChatGPT for Dummies, and it'll write its own book. I just think that the biggest barrier sometimes is we're in our own way, and maybe we're a little bit intimidated by it. I certainly was. And so I would just say, download it off the App Store. Don't get the paid version. Just download one of them. Doesn't, whatever, Grok, ChatGPT, Claude, whatever. And just first things first, type in the text bar, hey, I'm new to AI. How do I use this app? And it will tell you how to use the app.
Yeah, that's a good point. And dude, I would recommend, put a couple different ones on and play around with them because they are suited differently. They've got different strengths and weaknesses. And we as humans are just going to find certain platforms that we just gravitate to more. And so many free options out there, but you do have to be careful. You have to proof it. It's not gospel. It will sometimes go off the rails a little bit if you're not giving it the right prompts. Again, I want to plug your podcast. You did a whole episode on ChatGPT for firefighters, and some really, really valuable information in there, and about prompting and that sort of thing. Because you're not going to get anything valuable out of it if you're not putting the information in. And so you have to learn how to prompt that thing. And then you need to learn how to proofread it and, make sure you clean it up a little bit. I don't recommend, asking it to create a professional document for you and then pushing it through with all the silly emojis it likes to, include in it or that sort of thing. But it is, like you say, a force multiplier for sure. And we just need to be careful about not replacing the time we're saving by utilizing these tools, by creating more work.
100,000% yes. The other thing too is that it's almost like, and I'll get the quote wrong. What's that Batman line? The hero we need, not the hero we deserve. I have serious concerns about AI. I think that anyone who's seen the Terminator movies knows that this is pretty much how Skynet started. And I don't want to sound alarmist, and I don't think that's going to happen, but the chances of it are not zero. I mean, they're not high, but they're not zero either. And so in many ways, it's the hero we need. And I think that the reason I would say that is because the complexity of fire department administration is not increasing, it's increasing exponentially. It's increasing exponentially. And now our fire service administrators, chiefs who they made their bones kicking in doors and pulling lines and cutting roofs. And that's where their real expertise is. And now they're managing things like quantum computing and artificial intelligence and data aggregation. And those concepts are just getting more and more complex. And it's not like we're getting a lot more people to manage the increasing complexity. And it's not like we're, sending our people to, like every department has the time and money to send everybody to the training that we need to get these things done or to engage with these technologies. And so I see AI really as a necessity at this point. And again, the hero we need, not the hero we deserve. Is it the best thing? Is it all safe and it's all sunshine and rainbows? No. But I think that because the challenges we face are so unique and so complex, and they're only going to get more complex, AI, I think, has the potential to really be a short-term bridge to get us a little bit more comfortable with what I see as an increasingly complex landscape.
I agree. And as we're kind of looking into the future a little bit, our skill sets are having to evolve. What do you see, that we might need 5-10 years down the road that we don't need today? And I think some of it is probably leveraging this technology. Do you have any other thoughts on that?
Technology is evolving so quickly. It's almost impossible to say, "Hey, 5 years from now, this will be the technology we're using for this." I think we could try, but I think it's evolving so quickly. It's very difficult. But what I would say is there are certain prerequisites that we're going to need to start providing to our workforce now, regardless of what the technology in 5 years looks like. I just pitched a project to our chief, which he's greenlit for a pilot. There's a platform called Coursera, which is an online learning platform that I really like. And we're going to pay for a premium membership, which is $50 a month for everybody that gets assigned to administration. And each role is going to have courses that they need to take. Like, so for example, we're getting a new lieutenant of planning, a new planning lieutenant. And the course that I would have him take is you need to take a course on understanding fire department data. So, you need to take one of these 3 courses, which are free with your Coursera membership. The reason I think that's so important is that really, regardless of what comes next, whether it's AI or quantum computing or advanced data analytics or advanced, collaborative technology, we're going to need to have some basic skills. We're going to need to have people who understand what good data is versus what bad data is. We're going to need to have people who understand project management. We're going to need to have people who understand program management. And I think that the way to do that is to invest in sort of low cost, low drag training opportunities. Like, I think, and Coursera is not the only one. There's lots of people that do that, but it's the one I'm the most familiar with. And so that's why I recommended it. And so I think that giving some of those foundational skills that we otherwise probably wouldn't have been providing our fire service administrative folks is going to be really important for whatever the technology that comes next is.
Yeah, I agree. I'd recommend looking into it for anybody, whether it is Coursera or one of the other ones. I think we use Udemy, I think it's called, in our city. And your organization may already have subscriptions to some of this, and you may have the ability to jump in on some of that. So seek that information. I think that's where we're at right now too, is that I think in the past in the fire service, we kind of spoon-fed the information we needed, and it was all, operations strategy, tactics driven type of stuff. And I think now it's becoming too vast, and it's changing too fast for us to keep up, for any organization on their own to keep up with it. So it really is incumbent on all of us individually to go out and seek that training that we need, or recommend that training, like you said, for your coworkers.
And just one more kind of final thought on that is sometimes you can't wait for your department to identify the training that you need. Um, if I waited for my department to tell me to go get my project management background and education, I'd still be waiting right now because there's so much going on. A lot of times, nobody's got the bandwidth to be looking ahead, and sometimes you're in the best position to identify those gaps. And so, from my vantage point, I was thinking to myself, here I am, a captain, newly promoted captain. I'm in administration and I have several projects that I don't really know what to do with. I think I should go to school for project management. And you may be in the best vantage point, or you may have the best vantage point to understand that. And so don't be afraid to kind of step out on a limb and explore some technologies that maybe haven't been standard in the fire service, and maybe you do kind of have to go out on a limb there and be the person that champions new technology or new disciplines of practice, like project management, for example.
Agree completely. Get out there, seek it out, get what you need, and you might find that other people can benefit from it as well. So, Peter, as we start to wrap up here, I really appreciate you being here and just jam-packed full of good information and tangible, usable information for people. What keeps you motivated? Because as someone who has recently started a podcast myself, it's a lot of work. And what kind of keeps you motivated to produce Project Command and continue to advocate for better project management?
Yeah, I actually really love that question, and it's kind of a cheesy answer, so I just hope your audience will bear with me. But I really feel a tremendous sense of debt to the fire department. I got hired when I was 23, and I had done live-in volunteer program in Montana. But I had my dad was it's called a biostatistician, basically a mathematician, and my mom was a college professor. She taught foreign policy with an emphasis on the Middle East and the Horn of Africa. And so that's the kind of stuff I heard about growing up. I didn't learn how to change oil in a car. I didn't learn how to weld. I didn't learn how to cook. And so when I got to the fire station as, a brand new rookie right out of the academy, they probably thought I was like an alien. They're like, what do you mean you don't know how to do any of this stuff? And so, I was at a firehouse with a bunch of, the youngest guy after me was 37 and I was, 23. And so I had people really take me under their wing and teach me how to change the oil, teach me how to, cook, how to balance a checkbook, and how to not spend my entire paycheck after 2 days and then be eating ramen noodles for, 12 days. And so at a time in my life when I really needed structure, the fire department was there for me and taught me a lot of the valuable lessons that, I may be the kind of person that I am today. And, that's how I met my wife. And so I just feel like the fire department invested in me when I really had nothing to offer. And I feel like now I'm in a position where I have this, I think this information is really valuable, and I think it can make a big difference. And I think that, the ability to manage a project is the difference between getting life-saving technology in service and not getting it in service. Or it's the ability to set up a mental health clinician so you can reach out to your people when they really need it, or not doing that. And so I feel that what keeps me motivated is I feel like this is how I can give back to the fire service that has given me, it's given me everything. And so I just feel a tremendous sense of loyalty, to Henrico Fire Department specifically, but to the fire service more broadly.
I think it's a fantastic answer, and I relate 100%. I was the same. Came in as that young kid needing some direction, and boy, did I get it. And I just appreciate what the fire service has offered me, and really why I'm doing what I'm doing as well. Well, thanks, Peter. Just really appreciate you coming on. Thank you all for tuning in, whether you're watching this on YouTube or listening on one of the audio platforms. Really appreciate it. If you find benefit in what we're doing here, best thing you could do is comment, like, subscribe, follow the show. Really, really does help. And that way you won't miss any future episodes as well. If you have feedback on the show, please email me, opstalk.wfd@gmail.com. And we'll see you next time.
Thank you so much for having me on, Chief. This has been a blast.